See you soon.
I've gone ahead and pressed record straight away. It's so nice to see you all. What a beautiful surprise to see Timmy. Oh, hi guys. Well, I am super duper excited about today. Welcome to our third Psychedelic Sundays with Earth Pulse. It's 8 p.m. over there in Western Australia. It's 7 a.m. here in Mexico, and it was one of the most beautiful. I had to jump on the boat and come over to the hostel, and it is silent out here, and I can hear how much wildlife is actually around Tulum, and it's just stunning. So I'll just give you a really quick introduction to what we're doing today. For those who haven't jumped on yet, if you watch the replay, it's really exciting to have you here. For those who come on halfway, that's totally fine as well. So we are gonna jam out for a little bit, and then we'll open it up to questions. So I am particularly excited about today because Alan is one of the reasons I am on the path at all, I believe. And I think that, you know, I started working, we're going to talk about a lot more than just Bufo, but to work with this medicine personally, I equate a lot of the ways that I do it to working alongside of Alan for the first. If you are on here, I know that there's a way for me to mute people, but I'm not sure how to do it myself. So if you are on here, if you guys can just mute yourself, that would be amazing. Oh wait, let me see if I can do it. I'll unmute Alan. I think that works. All right, perfect. So yeah, I equate a lot of the way in which I facilitate to working alongside Alan, and it has been an absolute joy to learn from Alan, to be inspired by Alan, to play and to have some incredibly interesting conversations. I think we have had some just really interesting conversations about the nature of the universe, about the nature of things, the human mind. We talk about everything. So I'm really, really, really excited by this. Now, anyone who hasn't met me before, my name is Holly. I'm the co-founder of Earth Pulse Collective. I spent the last 8 years kind of traveling the world, wanting answers to life's deepest questions, but underneath all my questions was really a desire to be free and to be liberated. And especially in the last year or two, finding a whole lot of alternative methods to help us wake up, to help us liberate ourselves. So I have been on many paths similar to Alan, although he's been on the journey a lot longer than I have. And I think finding our way into utilizing psychedelics, we all agree that they're tools, but they're incredibly powerful tools. And they're tools that a lot of people are searching out right now because we're looking for more methods to try and wake ourselves up. So we're going to have a chat about Alan's journey. And I think can we go back to the beginning, Alan? What happened? I want to go all the way back to the beginning. I know that when you're early 20s, you found your way into India. Do you want to just share a little bit about how you started, how you found your way into India, and what actually, you said that was like the beginning of your awakening process, and I was reading through your bio. What happened in India? And yeah, let's start there.
Sure, yeah. First of all, thanks for the invitation to be here, Holly. It's an honor and a pleasure to share, and I'm excited to be here as well at this time. So, let's just say I left high school somewhat disillusioned and fell in with a kind of a pretty hard drug kind of culture crowd that I grew up in, heavy drinking, etc. around here. And actually it wasn't a great scene. And I guess at some point in my late teens, I think I was about 18 years old, and I decided I just had to get out. I was pretty disillusioned after high school, to be honest. I ended up going to Europe, and then I spent about a year there, just backpacking and working on jobs there. Israel, about 5 months. That was kind of a really interesting time, actually. And then back in Australia for a bit. And just before I went to India, I just like to mention this, that I was in a bookstore in Kuranda in Far North Queensland, and there was a couple of books that fell off the shelf there. They were called the Pata tapes, and they were actually channelings by a lady whose name is Jani King, who I didn't know, but she actually lives there, right in Kuranda in Far North Queensland, and so these were profound. These had a profound effect on me. These books. I think I read them both like 4 or 5 times each, and just like, you know, just taking in more and more. And then through my travels over, also previously my time in Israel, but then also in India, I actually started exploring with LSD a lot at that time, and so I attribute both. These books in particular, among with other ones, but these channeled works really stood out to me as and offered me a whole new perspective on things. And in conjunction with LSD, at that time, just really opened my mind, you know. And yeah, put me back in touch with myself, which, you know, I feel this is sort of also just so important for us at this time to understand as well, that we have to come back and get in touch with ourselves and learn to trust ourselves. And so the psychedelics, LSD and mushrooms a lot, opened up a whole field of creativity for me. It took me out of my depression and difficulty that I had experienced through quite a hard time going through high school, and it was a very difficult time of my life. And yeah, opened up a whole new world for me, which was positive. You know, it was creative. I felt like I was sharing something good with the world. People appreciated it. It was, you know, this is, you know, you get this feedback, you know, so it's, and so, yeah, I spent 10 years or so, over 10 years, actually. That was my sole source of income and means to live for that time. I was with my partner for that 10 years. We traveled and we were performing in Europe, North America, Asia, and back here in Australia over that time. Yeah, what else can I say?
I want to jump in here. I'm curious because, you know, when I had what I call my quarter life crisis when I was 24 and my whole life in Australia really fell apart, the next thing that I felt really called to do was go to India. And there wasn't really much rhyme or reason for that. And I remember having this idea of India. I had been there when I was 17, but to be honest, I didn't know a lot about it. But I had this feeling that, you know, India was, you know, the place where people go for spiritual awakenings. There's something special in India. Now, I spent 6 months there traveling by myself. And all I can say, it wasn't what I expected it was going to be. You know, I don't know what I expected, but it does seem to be that a lot of people who begin to have these earth-shattering moments, or, you know, it wasn't the same book as you, but I had conversations with God fall into my hands just before I went to India in a very similar type of synchronistic way. So there, and I've read other people's stories who also seem to have at some point found themselves in India. Now, not everyone finds themselves in India, but do you think there is something about India? And I'm curious as to what was your like awakening experience from India? Because as I said, it wasn't what I expected.
Yeah, I mean, India is such an incredible place, and I mean, I met an Irish guy there, and he said it's like, it's not like going to another country, it's like going to another planet, you know. It's like planet India. It's like, and yeah, I mean, it's so yeah, India was mystical, magical, and it was also a kind of a rude awakening for me as well. You know, it was like slap, you know, like bang, you know, it's just complete chaos. But it's like, you know, but in amongst all that, you know, you see like people, like kids who have very little playing in the streets, and they're happy, you know. And it's like, you just, you know, travel is so rich and rewarding in that way that it can just help give you a different perspective on on life, and traveling through third world countries has been like that, to see that it's not, it's obviously, I mean, it's nice to be comfortable, but it's not where our true happiness lies. It lies elsewhere. But India is just, I mean, it's such an amazing place, because it's just, I think that there's more religions, different religions in India. There's more than any other country. There's, I mean, it's got everything. It was the seat of Tantra, many years ago. I mean, a lot of those teachings went, I think they got quashed and went very underground. But I do believe at one point in parts of India and Tibet that this was a really beautiful way of life for people. Before the Mughal invasion, etc. But nevertheless, it's still an incredibly mystical place, and it's just, everywhere you go, it's like spirituality is just at the heart of life for people in India. I mean, I haven't. I lived there. I spent about a year there, and yeah, it was an amazing, magical time. We travelled around the north and the south, and and it was there that we had time to work on our art and our creativity, and yeah, just explore meditation and other ways as well, but. It's just something about the place, isn't it? And I mean, if you throw LSD in the mix, it's just, even without psychedelics, it's an incredibly, rich and beautiful.
I was saying, I can honestly say I've never had LSD in India. I remember being in Varanasi last year. And the first time I went to India was 13 years ago. So it's changed a lot in the years. And I remember being in Varanasi last year, and there's a lot of psychedelics now been done and offered on the streets. And I remember thinking, I am not taking LSD in this place. I already feel like I'm on an LSD trip. I'm not doing that to myself. But I can agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of my experience of India as well. And that it wasn't that I had some sort of like life-shattering inner, I don't want to say I didn't have an inner transformation, because it all is, but it wasn't, whatever I thought mystical was, it didn't seem to be like that for me. For me, it was being in that space, and like what you said, seeing children who were happy with nothing. That hit me really hard. And coming from a Western society where we had so much, but so many people were struggling in their minds, and then seeing people who have nothing genuinely happy was a big shift in my life. And the other thing was, when I went back there when I was 24, I got brought up in a religion in Australia that did not believe in reincarnation. We didn't talk about death. We didn't talk about kind of any of that transitional part of our life. So I thought that death was something that was horrific and to be feared. And I thought that reincarnation was only something that really crazy people thought about. But when I got to India, I realized I was a minority in the world. I was a minority in the way that I thought about death. I was a minority in the way that I dealt with death because of the upbringing I had had. And I remember one of my first experiences of death not being something terrifying was this woman riding up to me on her bike in a little town in Mayapur, and she was beaming, like absolutely beaming. It looked like she had just seen the birth of her granddaughter. That was the kind of like beamingness. And she got to me and she said, "Oh my God, I have just witnessed the most beautiful thing." And I thought she was going to say the birth of my granddaughter. That's the feeling that it was. And she said, "My friend just left their body." And it was one of the most beautiful things I have ever witnessed. And I remember having these massive shifts around how I viewed death when I was in India. And that was just one of many. And I didn't know I was going to talk about that, but maybe going into, as we get to Bufo, we can talk a little bit more about the process of death as well, something we don't talk about in the West, and I think is a grave misservice to a lot of us. Because even Thich Nhat Hanh says one of the deepest fears that we have is the fear of death. So did you have any kind of life-changing moments around death in India? And also because there's so many people, you see more death of animals, death of people if you're in Varanasi. I just wanted to open that up for a second.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, firstly, yeah, I completely agree with you. I think this is like actually a really important conversation for us all to be having at the moment. And I was thinking earlier today, I'd love to talk about this because it's really at the core of, yeah, it's really at the core of everyone's fear. And so, yeah, I think it's really great to talk about it. My experiences in India. I mean, I was in Varanasi, but I don't think I had any at that point in my life. I didn't really feel I had any really mystical experiences around death or any big realizations, but I just, and I still actually carried a lot of fear about it myself. But certainly through some of my psychedelic mystical experiences there, I certainly had some of the scariest experiences of my life, and also some of the most beautiful as well. It was a crazy, chaotic time. But yeah, I'd love to jam out a bit more and talk about that, particularly in relationship to the toad and to Bufo and
Well, just before we get to Bufo, I know that your journey took you into a path of Tantra first. So after you spent the years performing, I don't think you actually mentioned that Alan was a fire performer and then in sound. So you said you're creative, but he's actually wicked fire performer. And then you got into sound, and then you found your way to Thailand, I believe, and you started with a school of Tantra. So just want to speak a little bit about your journey with Tantra, and because that came first, and then you found Bufo after that. And I know that Tantra had quite a profound effect on your life as well, and still something that you utilize in your daily practice. So do you want to talk and I think a lot of people misunderstand Tantra as well. So maybe sharing a little bit about that.
Sure, I'd love to, because I think, yeah, it's all a part of it. It's a super big part of it, or a piece of the puzzle as well. And it's right at the core of who we are, yeah, let me just say that, after I've gone through high school, I mean, I left high school, looking back on it now, I was traumatized, I've been through a lot. And like my dad was, just to lay a bit of a foundation for things, like I didn't really have a really healthy male role model in my life. My father was very sick growing up, so I didn't really have anyone there for me. And certainly in terms of relationship and sexuality, I was in the dark, and I think that's the case for a lot. That was kind of the case for a lot of us. Whereas if you look at what I believe, was the history in India when Tantra was a big part of their culture, and also I believe in China and many cultures around the world held sacred sexuality as it was, they didn't have shame and guilt around sex, had not been introduced into their culture. That was sort of something that came at a later time. We can talk more about that, but in any case, it's like, I can imagine, and from what I've read and what I understand, that growing up in India, say, you would actually be taken to be with a priestess, a tantrika, if you were a young man, for example, and these beautiful temple dances, that would dance in samadhi and actually initiate young men into the ways of love and relationship and sexuality. And they were highly revered, their role and their position. And so I really feel like with the introduction of, not just the Catholic Church, but in whatever way this happened, there was a sort of a fall from grace, and that the powers that be, they understood that sexuality was the seat of our empowerment, and you know, it's a very powerful part of who we are as a being. And so, you know, like the king said to the bishop, you know, you keep them guilty, I'll keep them poor, that way we'll always have them in control, sort of thing, you know. So there started to be this introduction of shame and guilt around sexuality, and that's where things started getting weird. And sexuality started getting perverse, I believe, you know, because people went into suppression instead of a natural guided exploration, and started, and it sort of sexuality went into the shadows, and then it started becoming, you know, all sorts of kind of not so healthy expressions of it, and actually, it's super interesting because India today is a far cry from, it's one of the most, you know, from what it used to be, it's one of the most sexually repressed countries on the planet. And, you know, I don't know exactly how that happened or it came about, but it went from being a sexually liberated culture, maybe thousands of years ago, to, you know, they have the way that things that happen there, it's like, you know, it's shocking to how women are treated in some parts, not all, you know, but anyway, I'd heard about Tantra, and I hadn't really thought too much of it, but I was at a point in my life, I think I was about 35, 36 years old, and I was like, I've really got to take a look at this, you know, at my sexuality and my relating and relationships, and because it just, you know, feels like there's something seriously missing here, you know. And so, you know, I was actually introduced to a school of yoga in Thailand by a good friend, Ella Shannon, and so I'll always be grateful to her for this, because that was my, you know, the beginning of my journey into yoga and Tantra, and it really changed my life, you know, in so many ways. And yeah, I spent time with a few different schools of Tantra in Europe and back here in Australia, and so, yeah, you know, I sort of took what I got from here and there and sort of have made my own, you know, path with it, and yeah, it's somehow, you know, I'd sort of gone away from psychedelics, which was probably not a bad thing, because I was you know, in my early 20s, they were an amazing tool, but I was sort of, they didn't have the framework of how to use them so constructively. It was, you know, I don't see there's any right or wrong. I think, you know, you know, I had some amazing experiences with them recreationally. I don't say people should or shouldn't use them recreationally, or they should only use them ceremoniously. It's an individual choice. But in any case, I'd sort of taken an exit from that path for quite a few years by the time I got to Thailand. And then a few years into my explorations with Tantra, it somehow just sort of naturally led me back into exploring psychedelics. And I just, you know, I've been hearing about ayahuasca for a while, and I got a message from a couple of good friends, Killian and Elle, and in Peru, and they invited me to go and spend some time in a village there in the jungle. And so I just sort of been, you know, I've been hearing about it for a while, and so I was like, okay, this is it, you know, here it is, this opportunity is here, I'm taking it. So I went, and then it was incredible, you know. I know you've just been there recently as well in the jungle in Peru, and spent time with the same sort of tribe or similar tribes there, and they're incredible, beautiful people, and yeah, had the most like incredible experiences there.
We seem to be following some sort of a similar trajectory, you know, in our process of self-realization. You've opened up so many beautiful paths of conversation. Something I just, I wanted to say that I noticed, just going back to what was happening in India and just talking about sexual suppression for a minute, because I really do feel this. There's so much beautiful wisdom that came from that space. And then over the last 13 years, I've been there. And even when I went the first time, I know that they weren't a liberated country. I mean, Osho was revolutionary when he was talking about women's rights and freedom of expression when he was there, which is one of the reasons he ended up in America, because it was so revolutionary to have equal rights and be a sexually liberated community. So that was, one thing. And what I've noticed with India in the last couple of years, we'll go back there, but I'm gonna leave India pretty quickly, is that there seemed to be this like switch over. The more that I'm there, there are Westerners who are in India searching for these kind of awakening experiences, where a lot of the Indians that I met, especially the younger ones, were really trying to go down this pathway of becoming very Americanized. They were more interested in their iPhones and in their sunglasses and in their, shoes. It was really such an interesting clash when I got there, thinking, I'm going to come to the most spiritual place on the planet. And when I got there, when I was 24, I'm like, I feel like more people in Australia were wanting to wake up than this country. And I remember walking through a sea of thousands of people and being like, they all feel asleep. In India, there was hundreds of thousands. And it was just a really strange, interesting crossover. But the history is still there. And I think there is something definitely mystical about that. So I want to leave India now. And just before we move on to Bufo, the core of Tantra, what would you say is at the core of it, what is, I don't want to use the word goal, because I understand there isn't truly a goal to life, but if I can't use a different word, what would the goal of Tantra be? Now, some people talk about liberation. So would it be liberation, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's, in a way, you can look at Tantra as just this incredibly beautiful art, and it's the art of life, of living, it extends out way, beyond our sexuality. But I think it's important for us to recognize that our sexuality is right at the core of it, of who we are spiritually as well. This is how we come into this world, and it's like, it's right there at the core. And so I would say, if you were going to say the goal of Tantra really is samadhi, and or satori, or whatever you want to call it, nirvana, to God realization, to realize, to transcend the ego completely, and even to enter into these mystical states, and the way that comes about is by cultivating our sexual energy and letting it build up, and letting it find its way up through the chakras, up through our body, right up through to the crown. And and so this is what is referred to as Kundalini. Kundalini.
This really dovetails into your experience with Sapo, because obviously you have been searching for something. There has been something drawing your spirit. You don't get pulled around the world to India, to ayahuasca, to the jungles of Peru, into the school of Tantra all over Europe, if there's not something searching or seeking something, because you just don't even wake up in your Western life and go, oh, I'm going to do that in my life. It's a really kind of pulled intuitive pathway, synchronicities. So after this, you found yourself with Octavio Reddick, and I know he's a bit of a controversial character right now, but regardless of that, he came into your life. And I know that your first experience with Bufo, and we can clarify what Bufo is, because some people may not know what we're talking about here, was a very profound experience. So I really want to talk about that experience that you had in your very first ceremony with Bufo. So just for anyone who doesn't know, Bufo is the term given to the Bufo alvarius toad that lives in the Sonoran Desert in the Amazon area of Mexico. And he is the little creature, the little dragon, who has gifted us with the 5-MeO-DMT. the 5-MeO-DMT being what some people term the God particle or the God molecule, I believe, or maybe that's DMT. I get confused with those two. But an incredible experience nonetheless of, well, I'm not going to say anything. What was your first experience with Octavio like? And yeah, how did you navigate that?
Sure. So, well, let me just say first that, like, I felt this beautiful marriage, like in my experience in Peru and journeying with ayahuasca there, and some ridiculously beautifully strong ayahuasca. That it really sort of helped me understand Tantra and how this, because you can use these medicines in a way to have the experience of opening the chakras. And so with ayahuasca, I feel like it opens everything up to right up to the third eye, to have this visionary experience of the third eye. And so they call this DMT, the spirit molecule, this type of DMT. And you're right, they're calling the toad 5-MeO-DMT. People are affectionately referring to it as the God molecule. So so I feel that it's opening that energy up one step further up to the crown chakra. If you like to relate to things in terms of chakras, for example, it's just, ways for our mind to understand what is happening. So yeah, look, I was just here at my place, here up in the hills, just south of Perth, where I am just now, at home on the land here. I'm really blessed to have this beautiful space to call home. And I got a call from a couple friends, and they were like, "Hey, we're bringing Octavio Reddy over with to share ceremony and with the toad." And I hadn't even heard of the toad at that point. So I just come back from Peru. I think I'd been back for a few months or something. So it literally came to my front doorstep, and I was like, I was like, okay, this sounds super interesting. Sure, let's do it. So there was a bunch of us that came. A bunch of friends came out. Some people I knew, some I didn't, that weekend, and we spent the whole weekend with Octavio, and he shared with us all. And for whatever reason, I don't know, just the space I was in at the time, I decided not to witness a lot of what took place. And there's no right or wrong about that or whatever. But I just, for whatever reason, I didn't end up seeing other people's journeys. But I was one of the last ones to go on that day, and I just went up there and so I hadn't really seen a lot of what had taken place. It's probably just as well. And anyway, Octavio served me up, my first pipe of the bufo, the toad medicine. It was a big pipe. And I remember he served me standing, and I couldn't stay standing. I fell to the ground, and then apparently he gave me a second one as well, which I don't even remember, but it was super. In any case, it was a very powerful experience. But what I do remember is having the most profound experience of my life coming out of what must have been the second one I'd taken, that he'd shared with me. And it was like, in a way, it just gave me confirmation of everything that I was hoping to be true, that I'd been hoping to be true, like about the nature of who I am, who we all are, life, the universe, and everything. It was just like, it was undoubtedly deep samadhi. There was no me anymore. I was everything, I was whatever it's like, how do you even put it into words? But there was no separation, so no duality. Simply, in that moment, it's so hard for the mind can't really comprehend, that experience, but somehow still we are able to have that experience. But it's sort of, it's beyond the mind's capability of actually compartmentalizing, because it's like an experience of where there are no compartments. It's like, you know, there is, I was unbounded is what I didn't have any boundaries anymore, you know. So it was incredibly profound, and it left me, you know, it left me in this beautiful state that I was in and out of for weeks, even months afterwards, where, you know, and I'd even been, I was still drinking a bit at the time, you know. I developed through my, you know, performing years, and it was kind of pretty rock and roll and whatever, as well as psychedelics. But it was like, you know, I'd sort of developed, you know, I was still drinking quite a lot, even though I'd slowed down quite a bit at that stage. All of a sudden, it just knocked that on the head. I didn't feel like drinking at all. I don't think I drank for like anything for like a year afterwards. And nowadays, you know, a lot of people say the same thing about the toad, incidentally, with not just alcohol, but other addictive drugs and tendencies as well. It's just like, you know, I might have one or two here and there, but I rarely have more than that. And, you know, I enjoy a glass of wine or the odd, you know, a nice beer every once in a while, but I really, you know, I'm grateful to it for that. And I just like to say, you know, as controversial as Octavio is, and, you know, I'm really open to talking about that and having any questions around that and him. I will always be grateful to him because, you know, how can I not be, you know, it's like, for what he shared with me. So, yeah.
I mean, everybody's just God and drag at the end of the day, all playing their role. So
Right. I love it.
We throw the baby out with the bathwater so often. And I think a lot of our revolutionary characters in this world, as controversial as they can be, they make a couple of incorrect decisions and then we throw them out. We have a tendency to love to judge characters who've made a lot of, you know, I'm not saying that we need to agree with lots of what they're doing. I want to go back and ask something quickly, because now I know you have worked with a lot of people with this medicine now, and I'm starting to see my fair share in the ceremonial space as well. And I know that not everybody has this experience of full samadhi. Not every time. It seems to be that different people, their level of consciousness will take them where they can go, but not everybody comes back knowing that they have had this full experience of samadhi. So do you think that your years of working, and maybe like we could look at this as a lot of preparation in your field of being interested, doing what you did through India, having your tantric practices, and then sitting with Bufo, do you think that played a role in the experience you had?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, you know, it was, I think I was just absolutely 100% ready for it. You know, it was just like in a way, looking back on it, the perfect timing for me. It was just like, you know, and it was just such a beautiful gift at that time. It was like, thank you, you know. And so, yeah, I do feel that I observe that as well in sharing with people that some people like myself are really in the space where they're ready for it, and just it's just the next natural progressive step for them. It's like, yep, okay, perfect. And well, I wouldn't say that others aren't ready for it. I truly believe that whoever finds their way to me or to the medicine is not there by accident, that it's all perfect, you know. But I feel to say on this note, I think the topic of dosage and amount is a really interesting one to talk about, because I don't necessarily feel that a super deep experience is necessarily beneficial for everyone, and often just depending on where someone is at on their stage of their journey, often I feel a lighter experience can be more beneficial for them than a super deep one. And for some people like myself, a super deep experience is just what the doctor ordered, you know. So, yeah.
Mm. Dosage is really interesting. It's, you know, I'm exploring with dosage a lot in my own journey and working with people now. It's been a fascinating journey. I want to come back to dosage. So I don't want to get too caught up on the term Kundalini awakening, because I think after, you know, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Don't get too attached to anything. And I do see people getting a bit attached to this idea of a Kundalini awakening. And then if they feel like they've had one, they're like, you know, I've had a Kundalini awakening. So I don't want to get attached on it. But do you feel that tantric experience of the, you know, the weaving, and I've heard some different schools of thought on this, where it kind of comes up, and I've heard some people say, well, it goes down and up, whatever, regardless of exactly how it happens. Do you feel that your teachings around Tantra and what you experienced with Bufo was that kind of Kundalini experience that they talked about or like sometimes have through breath work and through different practices in the school of Tantra?
Yeah, I do. I really feel also that this this can have a bearing and an effect on someone's experience with the medicine. In essence, like your sexual energy is your vital life force energy. Yeah, it's like and so going into the medicine, it's like if you're sexually, I would say, if you're sexually exhausted or physically exhausted, that is definitely not the time to go into a deep experience with the medicine, because the medicine needs some energy to work with, you know, and particularly on the bigger doses. So I even recommend that to people in the information that I share with them a few weeks before the ceremony, or before they come, is just to that you know, I look at the medicine experience as really having three stages. There's the preparation stage, and which I recommend, you know, to mentally, physically prepare for 3 weeks leading up to the ceremony. There's the day of the ceremony, the initiation with the medicine, and then at least a space of 3 weeks integration as well, you know. This is particularly if you want to experience a deeper dose with it. But in any case, I think, you know, you can take this approach to it because it is an incredibly powerful medicine and experience, and it deserves some respect in that way, and so not to be taken lightly, you know. And I find that if people have this reverence for it and this attitude of approaching it in this way, that it's just, it works nicely. It's harmonious. It's like, you know, it just, yeah, it just works well. So I feel that, yeah, I mean, in terms of Kundalini energy, you know, that's just a name that we can give it, you know, but it is essentially our life force energy, our, you know, yeah, and that is very related to our sexual energy. And so yeah, it's so, you know, the goal of Tantra in a way, and also we're just using the medicines here to have a very deep tantric experience, in my way of looking, and it is to bring that energy up. So instead of letting it out through, you know, like what is the most common type of orgasm, where there's, you know, there's a release and then often a sense of release, but then often it's a sort of a refractory period of actually 2 or 3 weeks that it takes for that energy to rebuild in the body. So I think a lot of people don't realize this, but I've noticed this in myself, in my practice over the years, that yeah, it takes me 2 to 3 weeks to build my energy up again, you know. So after that peak type orgasm experience, so yeah, the the aim of Tantra in a way is to, instead of letting that energy out through the lower chakras, is to bring it up to the crown. And I really feel that's what we're doing with the medicines. They're just allowing us to experience that. They're opening the chakras up and just allowing that energy to come up. And so you'll see, even in ayahuasca, but especially in the toad, people can go into some catharsis and purging, and it's just like, you know, energy moving. The body will be moving around, letting sound out, you know. It's like, and it's just all, that's just like everything opening up, you know. It's like, it's really, and through that process, it's a very healing process, you know, because they're at the same time as opening up, they're letting go of suppressed and trapped tension, which is often caused by our beliefs and our mental state, our way of thinking, where we suppress it, you know, shame, guilt, fear, contraction in the body. So going into the ayahuasca as well, any psychedelics really, but the toad especially, it's like you want to ideally go into a state of receptivity and allowance, and just let the medicine open you up, and let yourself go, and you know, let this stuff out, you know, that you've been holding on to for so long. It's so healing.
This is taking me straight back to the fourth journey that I ever had when I was with you, actually. And it was probably one of the most powerful experiences of my entire life. I know you're right there with me. And I don't remember the first part of it, but I do remember there was such a beautiful lead up until that particular journey. And I think the fourth one was the most powerful. The first, unlike you, it wasn't the first one, it was the fourth one. And I remember there was a bit of fear going into it, but I found myself in this space where, you know, I've described it as, I felt like 100 little electricity bolts had just been plugged into my system and then turned all the way up. And I remember screaming, but it wasn't out of pain. It was just like this incredible primal scream. And it felt like, you know, when I came out of it, and a lot of shaking, a lot of movement. I remember when I came out of it, I thought, oh, we think an orgasm is powerful. We have no idea. Unless this is like the power of what it could be. I'm like, holy, I would just scream. I think I swore a lot. I swear a lot. I think swearing is a passionate language. But also that feeling of there was nothing been hidden. There was nothing been hidden. There was no more suppression, kind of what you're talking about. It was like, I am the whole universe and there's nothing to be hidden. And this is it. And this is the full expression of it in this moment. And for me personally, it was incredibly healing at that moment, because there's a whole lot of underlying beliefs that I felt crumbled in that experience, which were disconnection. I remember going, disconnection, rubbish, lack of energy. How many of us walking around saying, oh, we're so tired, or there's no energy. I was like, that's bullshit in the universe. There's so much energy. Unworthiness, rubbish. Not enough love, rubbish. And it was just all of these core beliefs. It was like bang, 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 completely shattered in that moment. And I remember even later walking around feeling like, there's really nothing to fear. There's nothing in the universe to fear. And holding on to resentments just felt ridiculous. I was thinking, why? And so it was just, you know, this was one of my personal experiences. I know we all have different experiences and what we're ready for, but in terms of what you're talking about, I completely relate in that particular experience. You know, what I would really like to come back to, and we'll maybe talk I want to come back to dosage as well, but I know when you came out of your first experience, and a lot of people have this as well, where you are, and even me, you know, we are the universe. And for a moment you can remember, I am the universe. Even in ayahuasca, sometimes the more I've journeyed with both of these medicines, the more I have had trouble discerning between the two of them. I've had some ayahuasca that feel very, anyway, through my own journey, it's getting extra strange and weird and wonderful. But after you feel this, we're still on a human path, and we come back to this individual body where we're looking out at ourselves, maybe through new eyes for the first time. But in a sense, there's still a little bit of I'm still in a body, and there is something a little there can be this feeling of contraction until you feel like you're liberated walking around all the time. And so I know a lot of people can feel a little bit, they can get stuck in this idea of feeling depressed, like they've left that space and they're now back in this other world. And I've seen people say, oh, I just wanted to stay there. Now, I don't think there is any out there and here. The mind just kicks back in. But I know that you had maybe a little bit of your dance with this kind of experience where you came back after your first journey, and it was like, take me back there. And I just want to know how you navigated that, because I know we didn't talk about that yet, but that was also very powerful in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think I've shared that with you before. I remember coming back out, and I was even banging my fists on the ground, and I was like, no, because I felt like I'd just been blown wide open into indescribable beauty and love and power, and then all of a sudden I was back in the confines of my body, and I was just like, no, and the contractions of the mind and the ego, but I didn't, it was such a powerful lesson for me, because I didn't realize that I'd just opened something big up, and that I was never going to be the same again, and that that this gift was going to be with me for forever in a way, and like I said, the weeks that followed were some of the most blissful time of my life. So it just goes to that just goes to show how our attachment to anything is what causes the suffering. So this is I feel like this is the most powerful teaching from the medicine that we can get. Is like, if we can just understand this, that it's just make everything okay. So it's just to come into the energy and the state of allowance and acceptance. And just as you were talking before, I felt myself take a deep breath, and it's just like, you know what? It's like, yeah, you find yourself back in physicality, take a nice deep breath, and breathe, find your connection through your breath. I really feel this is like, so we can talk more about this, but the breath is like the connecting rod, the connection between who we are here in physicality and who we are in non-physicality, because I really truly believe that we're not just a separate entity having a physical experience. We are multidimensional. We currently exist in the non-physical as well, and it's just sort of like somehow we've just kind of like a bit of consciousness is split off into and taken into a physical form, and we're having this dream of non-separation. And so in any case, it's like, Tantra is the art of waking up within the dream, and understanding that you are not, you're not your mind, you're not your body, you're so much more than that. And yeah, so we can talk more about the breath, because it's at some point, if you like.
I think the breath is really good to talk about, because again, traveling and diving deep into many different spiritual philosophies and the ideas about liberation and reaching nirvana, I've definitely met whole schools of people. And I think it may be a little bit of a disservice, not that anything's wrong, of course, I don't really adhere to the wrong or right path. But when we try to transcend, and then we maybe experience this idea of enlightenment, being enlightened, fully in the present moment, full of light, but then I feel that there's a reason we chose to be human, in a sense. Like, we came here to be human, and there is a way to not live out there. There is no out there, but to really ground that knowingness and that light and that love that we actually are at the same time as we are human, because there is no separation here and now, so that we can walk around with our feet really firmly on the ground, with our eyes open. And again, talking a little about, there's no right and wrong, so I'm just making sure. But one of what I feel, something I feel is maybe the mastery of the human experience, is to be able to be present here with our eyes open, not shut off to the world, not disturbed by the world, not disturbed by other people, not trying to get out of anything, but with that connection to, you know, this universal knowledge that everything's okay, that everything's, you know, infinite, that everything's totally okay in the universe. And I think when we get a sense of that and can really anchor that back into the human body, then we can live these really awakened lives where we're here, we're present, we're full of compassion, and we're not disturbed, but we're not like, we're not out there, we're not you know, we're not floating in the cosmos in a different dimension. We're still here at the same time. Does that make sense? And what do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like in a way it's kind of leading on to this topic of death and life and death, you know, and our fear of death. And so, you know, like when I'm sharing with people, I like to ask the question of, can you be, ask yourself, can you at this point in time be the space for everything? Can you allow yourself to be the space for everything? So that is in that posture, it's like you are not in resistance to anything. You are in acceptance, allowance of everything. And so, and that means when we say everything, we really mean, you know, it must mean everything. Even, you know, even the things that we would hate to allow into our space, or, you know. And I feel like this is our biggest challenge, is to be the space. Can we open our hearts to love the unlovable, you know, that which we deem to be unlovable? And when we can, you know, when we can do that, it's like when we can be the space for everything, we realize that there's nothing to be afraid of, and that we're no longer attracting or welcoming anything unwanted into our experience, because we're not pushing against it. We're not, you know, we're not holding it in our vibrational field. So yeah, I like to really encourage people through the work that I'm sharing, but also, you know, this work is just a teaching for us for how to live our lives day to day, you know, like how to be in the world. And it's just a really beautiful teaching. And so, you know, the biggest one, you know, like one of the biggest teachings I feel we can get out of it is just to well, for one, to have courage. And so that means to, you know, because we're taught to close down, to contract in our posture, and our breathing gets shallow. So I encourage everyone to do the opposite. And I have to catch myself like this as well. Sometimes it's like, how am I feeling? I'm not feeling so great. Okay, what's my posture like? What's my breathing like? Okay, open up, nice deep breaths, you know. And so this is like, it's so profound, it's so powerful. It's just like so that's a posture of courage, yeah? Openness and breathing deep and allowing yourself to feel is actually, it's very courageous, you know. You know, there's no right or wrong. The tendency for people is to contract and go into protection and close down. But the problem with that is that you won't, your consciousness will adjust to that contracted posture, and that it's all connected. The sort of thought forms that you're having, the quality of your thoughts, your consciousness, it's all connected to your physicality and your contraction. So nature rewards courage, you know. In my experience, this is, you know, Terence McKenna said that, and it's so true. It's just like, and at this time, you know, this time on the planet, with everything that's going on at the moment, it's like we really need to be courageous, you know, and just open up and breathe deep and just really allow ourselves to feel.
Mm-hmm. Something you said before and what you're saying right now it's resonating so deeply that my eyes are filling with tears, because I feel that this pathway of opening to love what we deem to be the unlovable is really what we're doing here. And there's many tools and methods, and Sapo has just, or Bufo has just been one that allows you, if you're willing and you have the courage to really open and stand there and allow in the unlovable. I mean, we talk a lot about people's experiences into this light and this universal, love, but I've also been with you in those moments where I've sat there and the huge amount of what seems to be ugly, the shame and the guilt. I remember that one time that I was with you guys, and I would just remember taking off my top and sitting in front of you like naked, crying. I put my hair up, and I remember feeling like all the shame and guilt of my inner world. I just let all the ugliness out. And I stood there in the same thing, like with my head up and my arms back, being like, this is this is also me. This is also part of this expression. And I'm sure it was for me to stand there in that courage and going, this is me too. This is me too. And can I embrace this through that posture, not to collapse into it, not to try and get away from it, but to really open up and say, you are welcome here as well. And doing that in the presence of other people was even more powerful, because I remember thinking, I've done this a couple of times by myself, but to have I had 4 people sitting there witnessing this experience, it was just such a raw, messy human. This is also me. And I think that a lot of human beings walk around and we try and like put this mask on of, here's the beautiful stuff, here's the spiritual stuff, here's the good stuff. And we just like forget about the other half of me. We'll forget about, the demons. We'll forget about the jealous. We'll forget about the judgmental. We'll forget about the jealous. And yet that's also part of God. And if we're looking at like Matt Kahn's teachings, which I'm just really into right now, he says, it's a process to love revolution. It's a love revolution. And every time these things come up, do you have the courage to say, you are welcome here too. You are welcome here too. So I just wanted to talk on that again. I think this medicine is so profound in that way. Now, just coming back to death, because sometimes our fear of going into these experiences and actually getting to the point where we can open to feel this is we're afraid of dying. And a lot of people, when they come to Bufo, they're like, am I going to die? They ask the same thing about ayahuasca. Now, I have my own experiences of death, but what is your experience of death? What do you think it even is? Like, we say this word, I'm just going to throw it right out there. What do you think death is?
Okay, well, I think the best way I can answer that is by saying I don't believe that there is actually any such thing as death. And that we've just got to get over this whole idea of dying. Okay, but we can still use, because that's the terminology that we use for transitioning out of our physicality and leaving our physicality. I would just say that through my experiences with psychedelics, and particularly the toad, I've had some incredibly beautiful, incredibly terrifying experiences. I thought I'd died a few times on the toad, so I guess it was like a near-death experience. But even those most profound experiences, like the one I mentioned before, left me with this really deep sense and knowing that it's all okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's like, because if you have the experience in that of just letting go of everything, letting go completely. So it's like it's a real act of faith, just to trust. You don't know what you're letting go into, but it's just like, you know what? It's just like, it's so painful and difficult to hang on to everything all the time. I just, let's just like let go and see what happens. And you find that you land on this beautiful feather bed, and it's just like, it's like there's just absolutely nothing to be afraid of. So, I feel like I've experienced some scary times where I've been stuck in between worlds, like what the Tibetans refer to as there's various stages that you enter into after you leave your body, the bardos. I've experienced at least one or two of those stages where I was sort of in between worlds, and they were actually quite terrifying, and but still sort of somehow, you know, here. But even through those experiences, I don't fear the death, the transitional experience, and in some ways, actually, I'm really looking forward to it. But you know, but at the same time, I'm not in any hurry. It's like because the, you know, the toad experience, as well as sort of giving us that gift of understanding that we are infinite. You know, that who we are is infinite. There's no end to us. That it's just, it's not possible. That as well as giving us that, it sort of seems that with our fear of, we let go of our fear of death. When that dissipates, so does our fear of life, and all of a sudden we find ourselves, you know, they're directly related. So it's like, and we find ourselves in this beautiful paradise here. It's like, oh my God, it's so incredible. You know, it's just like the diversity. It's also interesting, and it's just like, how much fun can we have here? How much, you know, how much can we enjoy this incredible planet, and you know, the gift of our sexuality, and you know, and everything, you know, that's just such a beautiful gift in itself, you know, as well. And that actually, that I really believe that there, and I've had glimpses of it through that as well, that we can enter into these transcendental states through Tantra, as well as through medicines and psychedelics as well. So that in a way, the psychedelics are just showing us what's possible, you know, and what our potential is, what we're naturally capable of, and it's incredible. I'm excited.
I'm so excited too. I'm going through these waves as we're talking, and then again, I get to this conversation of death, and I'm so excited by it. I'm incredibly excited to die. And again, I have no desire to die, because I know that, you know, this is it. Paradise is here, but there's no fear of it anymore. And just talking a little bit into my experience of death, and realizing that I've had most of my major profound experiences next to you. Again, we were in the desert, and it was the most terrifying. I've had two terrifying experiences in my life, and one was earlier this year in the desert. And I remember coming out of the first journey and being like, holy shit, Alan, give me the big one next time. And you came over with another fight. I was like, what are you doing? And you're like, I think you want to go again. And I was like, no, I don't. And you were like, no. And then I was thinking about the resistance of that. And I was like, let's go again. And it truly was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. It was absolutely. But the funny part of it was, I thought about this as I processed over the days. The reason it seemed terrifying is because this guy was still there going, this is terrifying, you're dying. This is terrifying, you're dying. This is terrifying, you're dying. At first, the mind got on this loop. And then even the ideas of terror and death started to pull apart. And I remember thinking, I don't even know what death is. I don't even know what terror is. I don't even know what death is. And it kind of then dissolved itself and became beautiful. And the only thing that I can say after having an experience like that, and a couple of others with what I've termed, or I've seen my mind going, you're dying, you're dying, you're dying. I had that experience in a temescal recently, where it's like, that's it, you've gone too far, you're dying. Is that no matter how scary or how terrifying something has been, I have always been there. I have always been there. There hasn't been this experience of me not being there. So all I can say when I've come out is there is no evidence, none to me, that death exists. Zero, none, nothing. The only thing, and I talked to other people about this in their journeys, they're like, I think I died. And I said, well, were you there? And they're like, well, yes, but I died. I'm like, well, what is this thing that you're saying you died? You know, what was it? And they're like, I definitely died. And I'm like, well, did you? You're here, you're here. The only thing we can say for sure is that we know people put down their body at some point and the body doesn't get up again. That's all we really know in terms of when we look out in the world. So I challenge people who are scared of death to really think about, what is the evidence that you have around death? Because as far as I can see, personally, on my exploration, everyone will come to this. I can't find it. I can't find what it is. It doesn't exist as far as I can see.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And even if it does, so it's like, what is it still worth spending your life in fear and contraction? You know, it's like, but you know, in all my explorations, I've yet to find anything to really be afraid of. You know, with you know, and I really look at death as just a probably the most, it's probably going to be the most beautiful experience of your life, you know. That's the sense that I get, and that in a way I think it's just like, you know, waking up from a dream, you know. And you know, when we go to sleep at night, we often have a dream, and it all seems very real, and we're very caught up in it, and everything's, you know, and then we wake up in the morning and we go, oh well, I was just dreaming. And so I get a sense that actually when we transition out of physicality, we come into this very, you know, this very deep, expanded state that we experience, that we can experience with psychedelics, etc., and possibly even more, you know, and that we you know, tip our head back and laugh and go, oh my God, I don't know what I was so worried about, or you can just see the perfection in it all. And even if you did, you know, even if you did spend your whole life not doing what was in your heart or not doing what you wanted to do, you'll still laugh at it. But I believe there'll be a part of you that will be like, okay, next time I'm really just going to do the things that I really want to do. And so I feel, you know, this is actually a beautiful, you know, I get this sense that we do come here with a purpose, our soul comes here with we come here with a sort of a game plan, a purpose in mind, and that our soul has a journey that it wants to go on, and you know what it is because it comes to you through feelings of excitement and curiosity, and so I feel like a beautiful gift of the toad is just helping us get back in touch with that, and learning to trust in ourselves, and what is pulling us, and what feels good, you know, and not to let the fear stop us from doing those things that we really feel drawn to do, because usually there's some kind of, there's some kind of fear there as well, you know.
Yeah. Now I know we could actually talk about this forever, and I think death is something I'm incredibly passionate about. And I know you haven't read the book Home with God by Neil Donald Walsh, but it is very in alignment with a lot of what you're saying anyway. And then I think that I haven't read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which I also think is very in alignment with both your experiences, my personal experiences, and then these different texts coming out from all around the place. So I've done a lot of exploration, and I run a whole module right now where I talk about death. And I remember after finding the book Home with God that really talked about the process of death, and I highly encourage every person to get and read that book at some point. I remember when I sat with Bufo for the first time, I was like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It really is the same thing. And it's actually talking a lot about what you're saying, and it's saying the death experience is one of actually coming to remember the totality of ourselves. Whereas in the birth experience, we kind of shed some of that memory, and we become forgetful in a sense, so that we can have a particular experience. Because if we walked around knowing the totality of who and what we were in a human body, we could literally explode. It's that big, it's that beautiful, and it's everything all at once. So imagine, I remember in one of my ayahuasca journeys being like, I want to know everything. And as that kicked in and I started to feel, you know, multiple feelings and dimensions at once, I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to know everything in this body. Maybe that's a lot. That is a lot to feel. But so he talks about this experience of death being the remembrance of the totality of what we are. And he said, but we won't stay there, which is really fascinating. We won't stay in that emergence. We can kind of understand this, because if you entered into peak orgasm and you stayed there forever, eventually you would forget the experience of the orgasm. So it's the same thing. He kind of, you know, in this book, it says we go into this peak experience where the emergence, where we realize we're not the individual mind, body, or soul even, but we're the sum totals of everything. And that's so much more than even, you know, a mind could understand. But after that, when we do re-emerge from that, we will have a lot of understanding about the lifetime we just came through, and that there is purpose to the lifetime we came through. And then the individual soul, which is also part of the whole, you know, had its purpose. It had something that it came to planet Earth to experience in itself. And we can dive so deeply into this topic. And I know I won't throw a whole bunch of spanners in the work and talking about free will and soul contracts, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's a whole nother discussion, which is very exciting, something I'm very passionate about. But just opening up that discussion about death being, you know, this really exciting experience of remembering yourself, and then feeling that we have that opportunity with something like Bufo, which I feel like is the potential of that medicine to give you an insight. I've called myself a flatliner a couple of times. Something about like just plugging myself into the hole for a second, remembering, everything's fine, and then coming back into this body and moving through that. I have no idea how we're going for time. What I would love to do is I would love for anybody who has any questions, if they do, to come off their microphone and ask any, because these are big conversations, and I'll just give it a moment. You can share anything else you want to share, but in the meantime, come off your microphone if you want to ask any questions, and just ask away. Don't wait for me to see you. Just ask away if you have anything.
Yeah, it's just like we've just really got to get over this whole idea of death, you know, and I feel like what we're seeing on the planet at the moment is this huge opportunity for us all to, you know, we've been in this predominantly fear-based consciousness for thousands of years, and we're getting to a point, and it's all around, like at the core of it, all this fear is basically our fear of death, our fear of annihilation, you know. And so once that goes, it's like, you know, it's like there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just, and we can, you know, the potential for us just to live in you know, expanded state of super consciousness, I really believe is there, you know, and I'm excited that may be a possibility for us all to, in the time coming, and that this is really a time of great awakening at the moment.
So what I hear you're saying right now is there has never been a better time to get into Tantra, psychedelics, and talks about death.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's like, well, it's like, you know, like up until this point in time, awakening has been an option. Yeah. And I feel like it's, and some people have taken that option, you know, and here and there to varying degrees. But now with what's just, you know, what's occurring on the planet at this point in time, I don't really think it's an option anymore. It's like, it's kind of sink or swim, you know. That's what it feels like to me anyway. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm making a joke about that, but I'm also not, because I'm really passionate about the process of waking up. And I think that the energy on our planet is speeding up so fast right now that if you haven't dealt with your shadow self, if you haven't dealt and faced your own kind of fears and attachments that we're talking about before, they are going to start surfacing at rapid pace. And we have two options. They're either going to play out in fear and drama in your life and create an absolute nightmare. So some people are going to be experiencing nightmares right now, which they are on our planet. So, or you're going to be called to wake up really fast, face what you haven't faced, deal with the things that aren't you, and you're going to be called through it. You can't step over them, but you can speed them up. And that's a lot about what Earth Pulse is doing. You know, when I was traveling the world, I was seeing that we have places that are dedicated to, you know, ayahuasca ceremonies, and there are some people doing this, and there are some people kind of over here. And I just was like, we need to do this faster. You don't have to, but if you want to, if you want to catch the wave right now and like ride that wave of awakening, then how can we bring in as much tools as possible to really support the journey of waking up? We talked, you know, again, I could talk about this. This is my passion. That's why I'm bringing these conversations to the table, because I think looking at psychedelics, looking at Tantra, looking at breath work, looking at trauma release work, looking at awakening through artistic expression, looking at the foundational teachings about death and emotional liberation and compassion. These are the teachings we didn't get at school, but if we're going to liberate ourselves fast, as much support and information as we can have to do that is really, really good. And we are, you're right. Well, I believe, I feel that it is sink or swim right now. And if we're too stuck in the old way of, oh, it has to be this way, oh, awakening has to take 20 years sitting in a cave, or it has to only be through a process of just using your breath without using psychedelics, we may just sink. And nature is giving us all these tools, I feel, right now, because it's like, come on, we can do this. Yeah. Alternative isn't, there's no right and wrong, but the alternative is we don't allow human existence to continue. That is the alternative, and it's not a wrong alternative. If we want to destroy our planet again, which I think we've done this before, we can. We just, maybe we want to evolve past that and see if we really can create a paradise on this world. And for me, it's not because we have to. It's not because God says we must. It's because it's exciting to see if we're capable. It's exciting to see if we could break through, if we could shut ourselves off, forget about who we are, twist ourselves all up. And then, those games where all the humans get stuck in a circle and you try and unwind yourself, that was the journey. Can we unwind ourselves and come into this, new level of awareness about who and what we are and have that new level of experience? So anyway, is there anyone who has any questions? I'm just happy to listen to Alan and I talk about all sorts of stuff. Alan, I have no idea. I have completely lost track of time because I love this stuff. And I know it's probably opening another whole can of worms, but I would love just to ask one more question about something that is, we haven't touched on at all, because it's not something I've had experience with, but I know you've also journeyed a little bit with iboga a couple of times. And can you just give us a little bit of an insight into your experience with iboga and how it differs from, say, everything else you've done?
Yeah, sure. So I've journeyed with iboga 3 times now, 3 separate occasions, about a year apart each time. And yeah, also an incredibly powerful, incredibly beautiful earth medicine from Africa, from Gabon. It was been traditionally used by the people there. Yeah, look, it's a super interesting one. All I know is that it's each time it's just left me feeling super clear, and very still in my mind. And it's sort of, and so it's similar in some ways to the toad, but very in that respect, but very different in other ways. The actual process can be quite arduous, it's quite a long journey, 30 hours or 36 hours of just lying on your back. You can't really move much, but in a way it's sort of like you're in you enter into a very deep trance state. So you're sort of quite detached. You're just sort of observing your thoughts and your visions. It's quite a visionary medicine. So yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, in some ways it feels like it's kind of a psychic surgery, a kind of a brain massage. When you go for a good massage and someone gets in there and really and just sort of releases all that tension that's in your muscles, and you walk away afterwards feeling like all relaxed and and it's, I love good massage, by the way. I think it's very therapeutic, and so iboga is like a bit of a mind massage, because it's really like releasing. It feels like it's releasing, and you're just purging all this sort of crazy, chaotic thinking, bizarre, weird thoughts. And for example, my last journey was quite macabre. I was seeing all sorts of violent imagery, and it wasn't so, it wasn't so bad. It's not like a tryptophan where you might feel very kind of scared, or it's more like you're just sort of detached, sort of observing it. So it's just sort of more kind of interesting, but yeah.
Super fascinating. If any of you guys go and read Home with God, he does talk about, we've been talking about death. It's all about death. And he talks about, we go through stages, which is similar to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And then there's the second stage of death where he says you leave the body and you play out a lot of what's in your mind. And it's like watching a TV screen and you're taking from it what you feel to learn. So there may be something similar in the Iboga experience, just from what you're saying, to having that experience of, it's not painful or scary in the body's just lying there, but you're getting to do some sort of psychic surgery and see what's in the mind, and getting a chance to massage that out and really clean out the mind. I've had similar experiences to that with ayahuasca as well, where I feel like all the mind came in and I was sitting there being like, no, that's okay. No, clear that. No. You get this opportunity to clear the mind. And I think because we are a 3-part being, and there may be more parts of us, going through a process of really nourishing the mind, and we're not going to get rid of the mind entirely as a human being, but it can definitely go from being a raging lion to being, that puppy that is really happy to walk behind you as your servant, as you use it in this human experience. So if there are no questions, I'll let you have the final say, but I'm going to say what I really took from this. I took so much from this, and thank you so much. But, the thing that's really sticking with me right now is that nature rewards courage. I think that is a beautiful, beautiful quote to leave with here right now, because it takes courage to dive into the unknown and to have the willingness to explore yourself. And I think that where that courage lies, you'll also be very, very rewarded by discovering what's on the other side of fear, because courage only arises when there's fear. And I think what's on the other side of fear is just the universe or God revealing itself to us in this absolutely incredible experience of knowing that it's you. So have courage on your path. May you all have courage. May you stand strong in your path. May you step into the unknown again and again and again until all that isn't you has been burnt away and it leaves you standing bare naked as yourself for all to witness, because that's really the greatest gift on this planet. So that's me. I'd like to pass it over to Alan to finish it off. And if there are no questions, after Alan finishes, I will stop the recording.
Cool. Thanks, Holly. That's super beautiful. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for inviting me to come and share. And look, I just feel to say to people that these earth medicines are a beautiful gift from nature, and perhaps there is some incredible intelligence behind them. It's almost like they've been put here for us to help us understand the nature of who we are, and perhaps the toad more so than any. But I love them all. They all share. So they have such beautiful gifts that they share with us, and all I say is don't be afraid, but at the same time, have reverence and respect for them, and use them in this way, and be in prayer and in that way, in communion with spirit and your higher self, and in a state of gratitude and appreciation. It's so powerful. And I just feel to say that at this time also, with everything that is going on at the moment, if anyone feels like that is hearing this, that they are struggling with things, and I'm really happy to be here to chat with you. Give me a call, or we'll arrange a time, get on a call, and talk and share with you and share with each other, and yeah, you know, and at no cost, you know, it's just like, I just want to be here for people at the moment, if I can be, in helping share what I know and what I've learned and understand and what I feel can be helpful, you know, and really, yeah, because the greatest gift that we can give to each other in the world just now is our awakening, and our courage, and it's really a time for us to really, yeah, to have courage and not be, and it's okay, you know, it's totally okay to feel fear, to be afraid. There's nothing wrong with that. I still feel it sometimes. It's just like, but you know, I would suggest, don't shy away from it. Get curious about it. You know, go into it, look at it, explore it, examine it, and you'll, you know, like Holly said, you know, I'm sure you'll find that actually, ultimately, there's actually nothing to be afraid of. It's just, it's really in our imagination, you know, um, and yeah, I'd just like to share also that my place here in Perth is, I feel really blessed to be here, surrounded by nature and forest, and like, apparently you're not even allowed to camp in the forest anymore around here. So I just like to offer my place as a sanctuary for people to, if they feel to, yeah, they need to get out of town and connect with nature, because I feel this is important as well. It's really important for us to get out in the sunshine, to be in nature, to exercise, to take deep breaths and breathe and connect with the elements, you know, earth, air, water, and fire as well. To, you know, really encourage people to get together and come around and sit around a fire if you can, and at night, and pray with the fire as well. And you know, that light is there for us. So
You
yeah.
know, I wasn't going to say anything more, but I forgot to mention before, and I made a note of it. Having reverence for the medicine is really also just having reverence for yourself. And I think that's one of the reasons why it really, when you respect, or you go into anything in life, whether it's medicine or meeting someone else or a job interview, it doesn't actually matter. When you go in with reverence and respect, knowing that everything is divine, then you will have that met. You will have that met in yourself, because you're just putting yourself in that state. You're putting yourself in the state of reverence and respect. And so therefore you can have that experience of reverence and respect. And that's how the universe will match you, because there's no separation to that. So I think that's also incredibly important to understand. It's still just respecting yourself. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing to do. And I just want to share, like, Alan, one of the most humble, so humble that he won't even admit that he's humble, kind human beings I've ever met. And to offer your space, that's a real testament to his character, and to offer his time for anybody to talk to while we're going through such a global shift. You can also reach out to me. I'm over here in Mexico. I'm in Central America, so I'm here. I'm in a different time zone, but if anyone wants to reach out to me or the Earth Pulse Tribe, you're more than welcome. We're all here to support people in this process. And please feel free to share this video with anybody. I think these conversations are worth having. I think these conversations are powerful. So if you think there's anybody who would benefit from hearing this conversation, please feel free to share the video. And yeah, if any of you feel to go over to Alan's land or spend time with him, it's certainly changed my life. As I said at the very beginning, I attest a lot of the way to how I facilitate 5-MeO-DMT to witnessing how you do it with such humility, with such grace, with such strength and courage, and you know, courage, but not getting in the way of other people's journeys at the same time, and really letting other people have their own experiences, and just that. I'm so grateful. I'm so deeply grateful. And thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you to everybody who's turned up on here and taken the time to hear this and to let this sink into your consciousness. And may we all, you know, wake ourselves up and go share that with everybody.
Yeah, thank you, friends. And it's like, I agree wholeheartedly. It's like, it all comes back to just loving who we are, you know, and having that reverence and love for who we are. And it's just like, from that place, everything falls into place from there. It's just like, if we can, you know, yeah, if we can do that. So yeah, and I really believe that because that is the truth of who we are. We are love. That is all there is to it. Everything else is a misunderstanding. So, you know, I really feel like we're coming home to that, you know, and it's like some of us are already there from time to time in and out of that space, but more and more we're just going to be more and more in that space. So yeah, thanks so much, Holly.
I just slid across the page and just wanted to say, Jason, Zainab, Brian, I think Laura was on here for a while, Leanne, so nice to see your faces. Timmy, all of you guys here, I'm so, what a absolute joy. If you want to come off your microphones and say goodbye, you're more than welcome. I'm about to stop the recording. And yeah.
I love you guys.
Love you guys. So good to listen to you guys tonight.
Thank you
so
much.
Love you guys.
It's a pleasure. Great to see you all as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
I don't know how to stop the recording, so
Anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to share before we go?
If you've still got time, Alan, about the iboga.
Sure, yeah.
It's something that I've looked into a little bit and a while ago, and something I was pretty interested in searching myself. But I was just wondering, like your intention for when you went into it, and if, you know, from what I've researched, it's kind of like you talk to your higher self or get access to your higher self. Is that what you experienced through that? Do you believe?
Yeah, I would have to say yes. For me, perhaps not in such a visceral way as what I do with the toad, but I think, but yeah, it just brings us into this place of beautiful stillness, and from, you know, it's like where the monkey mind is not there anymore. It's just like, you know, it's, yeah, this beautiful space of satori or samadhi where, and I love this space. I love being in this space. And, you know, this is what meditation is all about as well, just to help us to access this space where, you know, our mind is not running the show. It's like, it's just there as our servant to help us to navigate through physicality here and to do the things that we've got to do, but we are just more in this space of the witness, and just in that way our attention is outwards. So when the mind is busy, it's like we're very sort of in the mind, focused, consumed with our thoughts. But when the mind becomes still, it's like our attention goes outwards, and it's like and we see all the finer detail of everything, and we see, you know, everything becomes more I feel like saying slowed down. It's like or more sort of logically sequential, you know. It's like we can see the natural order of things, and where, you know, what is the next logical step and progression that will be most harmonious in a way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, man. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, welcome. And I think, you know, people have worked with both. I've heard of people working with iboga and toad, in, you know, going through iboga and then coming out and going into the toad, and heard good things about it as well. In the same way, so I think it can work nicely in that way. I wouldn't say, you know, while I'm on that subject, I say, you know, when combining things, like, I think, you know, deep experiences of the toad is really something to be left for when it's on its own, where you have that few weeks of preparation. You're not going to mix it with anything. That if you're combining with it, I think it can be very interesting and beneficial to combine with other things in lighter doses, and you know, just, yeah, it can be an interesting experience. And Kambo as well is, as you know, is beautiful medicine, profound physical healing medicine. That's a great cleanse and precursor to the toad as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, brother.
Yeah.
We didn't end up talking much about dosage, but I'm just going to say really quickly on that. I've had some incredibly profound experience at the deeper levels, but journeying on lighter and lighter and lighter doses and just seeing if you can surrender into that has been really beautiful as well. So maintaining quite a lot of consciousness and alertness whilst on those very light doses, but seeing how much you can surrender has also been incredibly powerful. So there's a lot to be said about light doses as well, I believe, in the exploration of the self.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And to really spacing the experiences out, you know, and really integrating and making the most of it. But yeah, even a light dose of the toad can be incredibly powerful, super profound. For many people, it's you know, it's actually all they need. And like I've served with some people in that way, and they've been like, I couldn't have asked for anything more. That was incredible. You know, it was, you know, it's just, so particularly, you know, if people are in a space where they're already very open and they don't really have a lot of stuff to let go of, or, you know, stuff that's in the way, you know, it's just sort of like, in that way, it's just helping just open things up just that little bit more, and just lifting the last remnants of whatever veils may be in the way, you know.
You know, I had this particularly beautiful experience recently with a client who came, and so much fear, and the mind just went wild, absolutely wild, before we even got to the process of smoking the pipe. And so much came up, so much fear. It was like the emotional release happened before we even gave the pipe. And I gave her the pipe, and you know what? I don't think she had anything. It was almost nothing. And she ended up bursting into tears and going, oh my God, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And afterwards I said, you know, you didn't even have anything. This is all you. This is all you. And she was like, no way. And we looked in the pipe, and it didn't even light. It was nothing. I didn't see any smoke leave the pipe at all. And she couldn't believe. And I said, you know what? It may all just be one big placebo and permission slip at the end of the day. So, I mean, that was a really beautiful, beautiful experience too, that at the end of the day, you know, these are the permission slips letting you know what's possible inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, I think, like I was saying, just coming together and just being, you know, having the courage to be open with each other, and just, yeah, sit around the fire and or whatever, and be in the garden and just share and talk, I feel is like, can be so powerful in itself as well. Just like having this conversation here tonight, you know, is yeah, for me is yeah, super beautiful, you know.
I'm the first of many, many, many. Thank you guys all so much. Thank you for just hanging around our virtual fireplace, which is our phones and computers right now, but how beautiful that we can do that from across the globe. I love you all so much, Timmy, Jane, Leanne, Jordan, if you're still on here, Jason, Ryan, Zainab. Thank you all so much. And we'll leave it there for now, but just the beginning of many more conversations to have throughout all of eternity with each other. Bye. I'm going to sign out now. Love you, love you, love you. Bye.
Much love, everyone. Thank you.